inside my head. I try to turn it down, but I can't quite drown it out. I'm tortured.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. You're listening to Society Bites Radio, and I'm your host, Dr. Richard Himmer.
And I'm Sherry Himmer, and this is Authentically You, social interaction for the mind and soul.
For the next 25 minutes, we talk about healing and growth from the inside out. Today's mostly my healing. Remember, you are 100% responsible for your happiness, joy, and well-being.
So, Richard, we often get a lot of people who like what we're saying, want to set goals, but they get frustrated with keeping them. And today we're going to tell a story.
A couple of them.
Yeah, to really help understand why is it that sometimes we fall apart with our goals.
It's called mission aware versus mission blind. Mission blind, by definition, I'll explain what they are. So in mission blind, there's three parts to it. Your goal is usually blurry and ambiguous, what I call conditions of satisfaction. Your principles that drive you there, the engine that's going to take you there, called rules of engagement, are not principle-based and they're arbitrary. And your habitat, in other words, the container in which you live, and which is made up of your habits, your system, is not defined and haphazardly created.
Okay, let's say I have the goal of losing weight or increasing my physical well-being.
Okay.
So just by saying I want to lose weight, that's kind of blurry and ambiguous. Even if I say I want to lose 10 pounds, 15, 20 pounds, it's really not defined by saying I want to lose X amount of weight.
It's insufficient. In other words, your goal is a spindle, or it's a compass. It just says the direction you're going to go. I want to go to the direction of losing weight. First of all, your identity is that you want to lose weight, not identity as someone who's being healthy, but that's a different discussion.
Got it.
Second of all, the habits that you need in order to lose weight haven't been defined, are not being practiced. And then thirdly, the environment in which you live in. So I've got a number of clients this way. They're young single adults. They're emerging adults. Mm-hmm. They want to lose weight, but they're living at home. And their mother is overweight. And their mother continues to buy high carb, high sugar foods. And they'd say simply, Dr. Hammer, it's impossible to do it here. Everything in the cupboard is going to do exactly the opposite of what I want to do. In other words, the environment is compromising. So they don't have the three things that they need: a very clear goal, the principle or the engine that's going to drive them. So they need habits that they do regularly. And if you do the habits over and over again, you create a habitat. That's what we want to talk about. So that's a healthy way. That's mission aware. So if you're aware that you want to lose, let's just for argument's sake, 10 pounds, have you itemized your habits? Have you itemized your implementation statement? Do you know exactly the environment that's going to make the decisions for you? That's where we're going. And we're going to break this out a little bit more detail in the stories that we're going to tell. Story number one. When we first got married, I came to the table with pre-existing conditions. I didn't even know I had them. And one of them was at least 4-generation addictive behavior of isolating when I got angry. So I would call that a man cave. If it was a woman, she would be going into a chick hut. And so when we'd get angry, I didn't say that
right. I can narrate this part if you want me to.
Go ahead.
Well, we used to, like, when we were first married, identify that I pretty was even keeled emotionally. Like, you would say things, well, for a girl, you don't really get upset and you're always the same every day. But I seem to have this cycle. And we say, and I tracked it like every 9 weeks. You had this program running, and with you had to get upset about something because that was the pattern. That's what your family origin had taught you. There has to be something you're upset and mad about, and then you have to go and isolate and kind of stonewall the world or who's closest to you, which was me.
I know, it sucked.
Yeah. So, that's what it
Why'd
looked
I do
like.
that?
Well, we didn't really know, but we recognized that between the two of us, that emotionally we were running on two different programs.
Right. And yours was very desirable.
And I think you used to get mad at me for just being just even keeled.
I know it. What's with that?
I don't know. I can't control that. It's how I came programmed. But
yeah, you have pre-existing conditions you never told me about.
It's like you wanted me to get upset with you.
I needed you to, right?
Right. You
I
wanted
needed
to
my
drag
drugs.
You wanted me to drag into
Isn't that
victim
fascinating? And
drag.
I see this over and over again. And what's so interesting is it never comes from a position of judging. It comes from a position of empathy. Because that person who has to get angry at their spouse and create conflict or contention is simply medicating based upon a narrative they're telling themselves that wasn't true. And my narratives were very simple. I had the big four, right? I don't have worth. That comes from the fact that my mother, father, and parents.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I'm not lovable because I didn't have that emotional connection with adult figures, not to the level that it was satisfying.
And that one would sabotage our relationship
Constantly.
because you would have to do something to prove that you weren't lovable.
I'm not good enough was the other one. I couldn't be good enough. I couldn't get the right kind of job. I couldn't make enough money. I wasn't a good enough husband. I wasn't a good enough. This isn't very comfortable saying. I'm just trying to illustrate this. And then the fourth is the big one, I think, in my mind's eye, because it had never been demonstrated this way. I didn't believe it was possible for me to have mutual trust and respect with my wife, which means I didn't trust and respect Richard. In order to be mutual, it has to be individual.
Interestingly enough, I don't think there was ever one thing that you would say, I don't trust you on this. Like you trusted me.
But I didn't trust me.
But you would have that emotion of distrust.
Well,
even without any evidence of a reason for distrust.
Well, I didn't need evidence. That's emotional reasoning. That's what the world's suffering with right now.
Right.
They go into this emotional reasoning, and it's an us versus them. That's what I was doing, but that's all addictive behavior. I didn't know that I was a raging addict at the time because I didn't have names for it. As a matter of fact, in the 80s, they didn't even know. This is brand new stuff that didn't start emerging until the 90s.
Right.
So it was in the 90s that I started realizing this, and I started making the corrective measures, right? Early 90s. Okay, so the idea is the tipping point for me was this one time I went into the man cave. We were on Highlands Parkway, so we were in Tacoma, late 80s. You had done something, of course, that violated my immaculate perception. I was very, very upset with you, and I stewed on it for a long time. I mean, I was freezing you out. You have to be aware of that. You were aware of that. And after I'd pondered it long enough, I was able to get the drugs out of my body, which is really the process. I'm able to wean myself, of, at least temporarily, of all these rotten drugs that I had in my body that were opioids. They're addictive.
And it was probably testosterone and cortisol and
norepinephrine. Right? Those are the big three.
Yeah.
So I walked into the kitchen having processed it. And this was hard. Oh, this was one of the hardest things that someone like me could ever do, is to walk out of the man cave and re-engage, assimilate into society. That's one of the hardest things I ever do. So when I'm frustrated with you and I come and approach you, you need to know that is the hardest thing I'm doing. So when I approached Sherry in the kitchen that day, I said, Sherry, I've been really angry at you, and it's like 3-4 days worth, and I'm ready to talk now. And Sherry, this is a pre-existing condition on her part, was quite flippant about it, but was so neutral in the delivery. It was like a Hollywood script that she did. And she goes, oh, I didn't even know you were mad at me. Huh.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's not that funny.
It's funny now. Sorry. I'm still apologizing.
Yeah. Well, but how else would you respond?
And why should I be sorry, really?
Oh, Rich, I'm so sorry. You've been such an asshole.
Well, what could I say?
Exactly.
I've been happy living my life, and you've been over there having your little
Okay, and
issue.
that brings up a point here. This is what Sherry did later on when I'm still trying.
We have to tie this into goals and mission awareness.
I know. But do you remember the time we were at 64th Street and you marched into my man cave?
I think so. It was
my
over
gosh.
the boxes or something in the room, and
You were upstairs.
Okay.
I was ready to go to work. You're getting the kids ready for school. I yelled up something to you, and we misunderstood each other. And I clearly misunderstood.
we were
you.
doing drive-bys through a large house.
And we were both in a hurry.
Yep.
And you didn't understand whatever it is I thought I said. And I got real angry at you. So I did my typical, I pulled an Irene. I said, never mind, I'll just go to work.
And Irene is Rich's grandmother, bless her soul and rest in peace.
And so
she was very blunt.
We love Irene, all 5 foot nothing of her. So I marched into the garage.
And
I put my tail between my legs. I'm going to go into my man cave. I'm going to isolate, and I'll just go to work.
I'm heading to work. Yeah.
So
I opened up the garage door.
I think you had your fill of it, right?
I was calling it out is what I was doing.
Yeah, you were tired of me acting like a child. So Sherry walks into the garage, and she put her hands on her hips. Now, gentlemen, you know darn well, if your wife puts her hands on her hips, it's like I've counted to 3. Lights out, fella. You're done. And you said, I don't know if you remember what you said, but this is my best memory. You said, Rich, I know you're in your man cave. Mm-hmm. And you're going to go to work and you're angry at something that you think I did that I didn't do. I just want you to know that your anger is not going to disturb me at all today. I'm going to have a good day.
I'm going to have a great day. Bye.
And you turned around, and I thought, that has got to be the sexiest thing I have ever seen. I go, oh my gosh, I just had a huge testosterone movement. So I got in the car with my tail between my legs.
That's hilarious.
And I drove to work thinking, oh my gosh, that was amazing. She just walked into my man cave. How dare her? Mm-hmm. But I knew that I was wrong. I knew that. So by the time I got home, if you remember, all things were fine.
Oh, yeah.
And I apologized.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So that's the tipping point for me to go into mission aware.
So a lot of us, when we're setting goals, and we use losing weight, because everybody always has that goal, mm-hmm. But really it's the goals about our emotional intelligence that trip us up. And because they're so mission blind, let's now go into the mission aware part of how you work this out.
So you said something, it's our goals about
emotional intelligence.
Could you explain that, what you mean by that?
Well, it's like the goals of, I want to have a better marriage.
Okay.
I want to be able to communicate better with my kids. Like, I kind of know it's my fault and all that, and I need to do better. And I have this goal. In fact, we did this presentation last night. It was interesting to see on a Zoom meeting because we're in quarantine. Yeah. The goals that came up on the chat feed, and a lot of them were about relationships. I want to be closer to my family. I want to have better communication. Those goals were there, mm-hmm. But it's really ambiguous for people.
And that's what I call mission blind.
Yeah.
They have a kind of a direction, but the compass isn't very fine-tuned. So they're taking off from Los Angeles and they're flying to New York. But the compass could be anywhere. They'll end up in Nova Scotia, or they might end up in Florida. They don't have a really clear direction, and they don't have the mechanism, the habits, or the habitat, the engine or the car, the jets or the airplane to get them there. And that's what we want to talk a little bit about today. So we want to do it in the form of a story, see if we can get the story done in the time allotted for us to do it. So years ago, a long time ago, so this would be it had to be right around 1990. My brother-in-law, Ray, came up to me, and we were just chatting.
It was mid-90s for sure.
Yeah, and we were just talking about different things in life. And he told me the story of him and Jared, his son, riding the Seattle to Portland. It's a 206-mile ride. It can be done in 1 day or 2 days. And that Jared was only 11 when they did it. And that it was such a great experience. And he talks about it even to this day. Like, I've never heard it before.
Like 11 years old doing 206 miles on a bike.
Right.
And it wasn't a tandem bike.
Right. So imagine an 11-year-old riding 200 miles in 2 days with his dad. I mean, it's quite a feat.
Yeah.
And I thought about that for years. I thought I would really like to do the STP. Now, I hadn't ridden a bike since 1979, but it sounded fun to me. Well, lo and behold, in October of 99, I got this friend of mine. He was in the band with us. He approaches me and he says, I got an idea that I've been pondering for a really long time. And for Tim, a long time was about 24 hours. And he says, hey, Rich, do you want to ride the STP with me in July? And he made it clear that this was a one-day ride. So this was from October to July. So I had roughly 9 months, give or take, 9 to 10 months to prepare.
Yeah, because you had your option of doing the one-day version or doing it in 2 days, which Ray and Jared had done, but Tim wanted to do the 1 day.
1 day.
Because it was a bigger deal to do.
Oh, yeah, it's a big deal.
Well, obviously, you're doing twice as many miles.
As much as I had thought about it, I had never really set that as a goal, right? It was not on the